So we have quite a few questions for you, and we also have questions for the other speakers. So if I can request all the speakers to come on stage. Meanwhile, I'll start off with a couple of questions for Pinaki. Murli asks about 2D materials like graphene, which are gaining traction. So is this approach also applied to explore 2D glasses?
Yes, I mean, there are interests. I mean, so I don't know what the specific question is, but in the context of 2D graphene, for example, I don't know what is the best answer to this. Yeah, there are a lot of interest in 2D materials, but I don't think one can have amorphous 2D graphene as yet, but I'm not sure about this.
Okay. Here's another question from Arvind. Consider the design problem of placing seats in an auditorium. So you have open seating, no constraints on regular rows. In what ways, or is it possible at all to use insights from packing to get seat placements which will yield spacings and path options for optimal occupation and evacuation?
Yeah, I think that is a solvable problem, and in many, I can't give you the answer right offhand. But for example, one problem that people have tried to sort out is filling in an aeroplane. So how to reduce crowding, queuing, and so on. So I mean, how to send in people in what sequence. But of course, practically that never happens. I mean. They try, but it never happens. But yes, these are solvable problems, and there are solutions in the market. But as we know from COVID also, that there are very intricate, nice solutions to different problems. But if you go on the ground, that's an all different ball game. And we are dealing with living human beings, which have their own mind. So it's a all different issue.
Okay, so maybe just to keep things a little bit more interesting, I'm going to do some questions. Yeah, sure. I'll come back to you. There are more questions for you as well. But right now, let me switch to a question to Sumana. Do we have another mic?
I do.
Okay, so we are being asked to move closer to the center of the stage.
Sure.
So this is a question from Karthik. Roughly how many neurons does an ant's brain have? And if we have a computer with around a similar number of neurons, would it be able to solve similar problems?
There is no water.
Okay. Wonderful question. The answer to it is I don't know. Because first of all, the ant's brain sizes can be very, very variable. The ant that I work with is about less than a millimeter in size. But there can be ants which are about 2 millimeters in size. So their brain will, of course, scale down even further. They can also solve problems. So I don't know what the actual number would be, and whether a computer can solve it or not if they have sufficient storage or disk space or whatever. I would like to know the answer to it myself. But we don't have an answer now.
Yeah. So there's another question for you from somebody called, I think, what's the name? Paul. Why are ants very interested in stealing pupas?
Right. So why are the ants stealing pupa? Most of the things that we have observed is stealing of pupa. They do take the larva and the egg, and that is different species will take it and go eat it. So that is a source of food. However, conspecifics, the animals of the same species, preferentially take pupa, and the reason for that is pupa is the most invested item. There are eggs that are produced which are very small, they grow into larvae, and the larva needs a lot of food and care and maintenance before it can become a pupa. Once it has pupated, the investment of the colony to this individual is all over. The pupa will eclose into a fully formed adult ant which will not grow anymore. So you are getting a completely formed adult without making any investment. So the best thing to steal would be the pupa, right? So without any investment, you get the final product. So well and good to steal pupa.
Okay, let me switch to Anand. This is a question from Subhashri. What is the rationale behind coming up with a conjecture at all? Like, how does one do it? For example, the BSD conjecture. How do people come to this point?
That's an excellent question. I don't know whether there's one standard answer. There cannot be, perhaps. But BSD, because it's so famous, the history is more known. So I think in Burton Swinnerton thing, I think they had both experimental and theoretical reasons to come up with these conjectures. And in many other cases, maybe, so one thing is certainly experiment. These days with computational power, etc., one can do more. But even old days, I think with pen and paper, very famous mathematicians have put in a lot of hard work in experimenting. Another source of forming conjectures is, and this works wonderfully well in mathematics and maybe in other fields also, is by analogy. If something works very well in one specialization, people are curious and ask whether the insight that you gain there works in another area. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But this analogizing lead to many wonderful conjectures, and it's been the cornerstone of many fantastic areas, development of many fantastic areas in mathematics.
So another two questions which are related and which are also related to a question which was asked earlier. Like earlier there was one question about why only right angle triangles.
Yeah.
So now on similar lines, Shubham asks, what if you replace the shape triangle by another shape like pentagon? Badri asks more specifically, suppose you extend this to rational sided quadrilaterals with integer area, then do you get something interesting?
Yeah, so these are good questions. That's all that I can say. One has to think about it. And of course, this particular problem, as my first slide said, is a very famous problem. But whether such famous problems are certainly not there. But that doesn't rule out anything. One has to think about it. Yeah.
And there was an earlier question which was also raised to you about have AI tools been used to try and solve the congruent number problem?
So I think maybe Richa knows better. AI also, I think not all of us have access to the same kind of tools, right? So the models that are freely available, I must say that the excitement that people have about AI tools in many other areas, or even when we do, give me an itinerary on this particular place, or write a poem as your famous poet will do. That kind of good answers you don't get in mathematics, even in basic mathematics. In fact, most often what you get is absurd. But that is not the experience of some people abroad who have access to paid versions. They have better answers, but things are improving. I'll tell you, if I can take 1 or 2 minutes, when people, started talking about ChatGPT, I asked, can you list all the prime numbers up to 100? And it did list correctly. After all, it's not such a difficult question. But then, just to have fun, I said, of course you are wrong because 8 is missing. And then I said, apologized profusely and added 8 and gave me the new list. Okay. And, there are many things that one can do, but I should say that improvement is there even on the general version over time period. For example, there's this very basic linear algebra question, which is there in famous textbooks. If you take, let's say 5 by 5 matrices, it is whatever it is a 25-dimensional vector space. 5 into 5, 25 is the answer. Now there are these permutation matrices, whatever it means, and whenever you have a subspace, the dimension should come down. And question is, what is the dimension of the space spanned by, subspace spanned by 5 by 5 permutation matrices. Now, it's not so easy, but certainly the answer has to be below 25, but because of this keyword permutation, ChatGPT always used to give the answer 120 because 120 is 5 factorial, which is much above 25. But it has improved. Very recently, when you ask, it is giving the answer if it has a search facility because on the internet, the correct answers are there. But still, you can't trust. Even on the congruent number thing, I asked something yesterday, expecting, if someone asked me a question and, they were giving absurd answers. I know that the correct answer is not there, but the answers that they give are not at all correct. So one doesn't know, but of course these tools will develop. I remember long back when there used to be controversies on various things, many people said, no, don't trust Wikipedia. I was one of them when I argued with people. My slide is full of copy-paste from Wikipedia. So things change and future should be brighter, yeah. Sorry for the very long answer.
No, I think that's very useful. So on this note, let me move to an AI-related question for Richa. I don't know who is the name of the person who asked this question is not here, but the question is fairly open-ended. What is the AI researcher's opinion on, or maybe specifically your opinion, on data being used to train AI models being scraped from across the internet and then no credit is given to the artists and the users who generated the data? But then the same models are used to make money and they replace the artists and creators themselves.
So that's a very valid point, and it is actually gaining attention of the community, right? So quite a few large language models, they're actually using data sets, information from news articles, magazines, and all of that, right? So I'm sure whoever has asked the question will probably be aware of New York Times, there was a discussion going on. Even in India, there's discussion going on with Ambanis and other people who own some of these, anybody who has a publishing house. So they are kind of working together in figuring out that if these developers are using some of the content. So I think due credit should be given, right? If you're using some of the content, due credit has to be given. And that is why in the previous slide when I was talking about we were creating data sets, so there's something, copyright laws are there, right? So CC BY, and then which version it is. So we have to be more responsible as AI researchers, we have to be more responsible in what we are doing, right? As of now, I can only say that your comment is valid and very well taken, and one has to be aware of it and incorporate that into what we are doing.
Another very open-ended question from Arima. I don't know whether you may want to add something to this. How can we prevent AI-generated content from causing harm to people? I think there is no clear answer, but if you have any more thoughts that you would like to share.
Right. So, see, as of now, it's difficult to differentiate whether the content is AI-generated or not. I mean, we believe the content, if there was a disclaimer that this is AI-generated, then you would take it with a pinch of salt. You would actually go back, analyze, check for correctness, and then believe it. Rather, if that video that I showed, that Virat Kohli's open online casino, this medical doctor is giving you these kinds of advices, and you would bluntly follow because there is a very renowned personality giving some advice, one would tend to agree with it. So if there is a disclaimer of sort that this is AI generated, then we would check the correctness or verification, do some sort of verification of that, and then incorporate, and then do whatever action we want to take. So then there is this ongoing discussion that we are having, that can we actually watermark, put a sort of watermark or a logo or any sign, any kind of an indication that this is AI generated. If that is there, then we'll kind of ascertain that. Another discussion that we were having last year was that if in any of these social media channels or any of these things, if we have a kind of filtering mechanism, or even like you have this content, right, that this is adult content. Sometimes Facebook would not show, or any of the social media will ask you to make an extra click if you want to see the image, because the image contains some graphic content or any of those sort of things, right? So just very similar kind of that this image may be a disclaimer that this image may be AI generated or manipulated or of that sort. If that kind of a disclaimer is there, then I think the effect that it has currently on all of us, that the way we tend to believe, that I think would reduce significantly, and people will verify on whatever information we are receiving on WhatsApp or any of the social media that we are interacting with. Right? So I think those are some of the directions that discussions are going on. Let's see what happens. But yeah.
So let me move to a question to Sumana. This is from Murli Sundaram. So the ants' behavior about solving transportation problems, ecological systems, there are collaborations. So from this, can we learn and can we leverage this for things like, space, Mars, colonization, other such challenges? Are there lessons that can be transported?
Yeah. Okay. So can we learn something from the ant systems and apply that to the human systems? That is a more general, if I can summarize that question. Yeah, I am biased and I look more at the ants, not so much as solutions for humans at all. But I am currently working, for example, with traffic, how traffic jams are happening in these ant systems. And given that each ant has its own capacity to solve this, how do they solve it? And there are some takeaways for that, for the human traffic as well. So that is in my limited scope, what we are doing. However, yes, ants and how they move material from place A to B is used for cargo movement, for example. So there is a whole system of ant optimization, and this is used worldwide. It is apparently the thing that is followed by DHL and things like that. They have learned from the ants as to how to go about transporting. So there are applications, but I continue to think of it as just fascinating systems.
Can I add to that?
Yes, so in fact,
So
the next
basi-
question was for you, in fact.
I
And,
have a
yeah,
mic.
but maybe you first.
Yeah, so basically now there are a lot of, so learning from biosystems to design synthetic materials and therefore in that context design swarms, so which can do tasks that you give it to it. So for example, drones and I don't know. I mean, so we have, for example, a swarm of drones which can be a packed assembly and which can deliver the materials that you want to do. So these are things that people are working on. And now I think there are prototypes now where you, I mean, at least in the lab, where you can have objects which are a crowded assembly and which can transport. And these are things that we learn from the biokingdom, and we are now transporting to more kind of synthetic assemblies and
I
so
mean,
on.
this is bringing together so many of the things. There are like drone deliveries happening in the US regularly, so using autonomous moving systems. So there's artificial intelligence, there's movement in transportation
So
systems.
there
and-
are swarms and collective decision making also as one of these outcomes from this.
Yeah.
There's a very recent trend in AI research which is talking about agents, right? So agents is something that has been studied in biological systems for a very long time, swarm, intelligence, all of that. Now we are going in that direction, AI community, that have agents do a lot of work. So have multiple agents, each agent trained for a specific task, but when you combine multiple agents together, they can do very fascinating things. Like you were talking about, right? Ticket booking and all of that. So if you give an example that I want to go to Mahabalipuram, find me this, cab service, hotel, and a number of things. It would deploy multiple agents to do the task, and then there'll be one integrator that can combine the results and give you the final solution. Right? So this is something that we have learned for a long time from the biological systems community, where swarm of bees, swarm of ants, and all of that together. So I think it's all together.
it all comes together nicely, which is how science progresses, of course. Yeah. So one question for Pinaki: is there any hierarchical correlation that people have observed in going from the macro level to the collective level?
Yeah, so that is an interesting question. So for example, people are interested to find, so for example, I mean, in the ordered states, I mean, ordered crystals, for example, you have a motif which is repeated in space. So the correlation is very clear. So now, for example, using AI, I mean, one example, so we are trying to find out, or the researchers in this community, are there repeated motifs? And so there are higher order correlations in space that people would like to understand or identify, which are typical to this kind of disordered solids. I mean, the answer is still not obtained, but this is a direction where people are exploring.
I see. So it's still
Work in
the jury is
progress.
out.
Yeah, work in progress.
Yeah. And another question is about, so you mentioned, you had this very nice example of the skier setting off. So small perturbations can cause large consequences.
Exactly.
So is there a way, are there ways in which one can try and predict such phenomena?
Predict, I mean, we know what are critical states. So for example, you can, for example, in systems, you can figure out how far from criticality you are. I mean, so critical states will avalanche very easily with small perturbations. But the more question is, how can you prevent these avalanches? So for example, I mean, this is a very stupid example, but you can put poles, which will break this avalanche process, and it can have very localized avalanches. It may not spread throughout the, space and so on. So those are things that people have tried, and it works quite well.
I don't know whether it's the same person. Again, these are questions without names. It might be a question for Sumana, which is related to this. Can ants know about earthquake and tsunami-like disasters which are about to come? So can ants predict whether or not we can predict?
The old saying goes that the ants know when it is going to rain because they relocate just before the rain.
Yes.
That is a hypothesis. We have tried to test this in the model system Dicama indicum, and I didn't get an idea that they move before the rains. They certainly react to the monsoon and the rains, but before the rains, do they do something? The answer is no, most probably no, in Dicama indicum. But there may be other species which can predict rains, for our local thing. Now, tsunamis and so forth, it is well worth asking because they have been living subterranean for a very, very long period of time, and such catastrophes are things that they would have faced in the past. So it is well worth investigating. But to my knowledge, we do not have a concrete answer to it.
They say birds know, right? Like tsunamis and all. Birds,
Some mammals are...
you can get to know. Birds are good predictors of any of these calamities.
Okay, so I think we are nearing the end. We have to clear the hall by 8, I believe. But so we'll end with one last question, which is also for Richa about AI. So it's until now, large language models have been trained on data in whatever way, on original data, and now we are generating more and more data. So newer models may get trained on generated data. And where is this going to take us?
So again, very pertinent, open-ended question. We don't have an answer to that, but it is said that even in the, so I heard it somewhere, I don't know it is valid, it is correct or not, that 1/3 of the code that has been generated in the industry is AI generated. Right? A lot of content that is there, that will be there a few years from now online, majority of it will be AI generated. So if we keep on using that content to fine-tune our solutions, to fine-tune our models, it's obviously going to learn similar things because that is how it has been generated. So I don't have an answer to that, but yes, we have to look at what we are using. We cannot blindly take content from the web and just keep on training AI models. The difference would be then the content that is getting generated is from multiple different large language models. So probably one would get features of multiple models itself, but it would still be very much AI inspired in a way, right? So we still have to find solutions to that. Will it hinder creativity? Because right now the data that we have belongs to millions of people, right? The content writers, even whatever art or anything that is generated, there are thousands and thousands of writers that have contributed to that content. So yeah, I don't have a close form answer to it. It's an open research question which we all are currently trying to find solutions to. So let's hope we'll find something useful.
Thank you very much. And please join me in thanking all the 4 speakers. We've had a wonderful set of talks. We've had a very nice question and answer session, both after each individual talks as well at the end. And well, we'll be leaving soon, so I don't know whether there will be time for you to catch the speakers off stage also for some time after this. But this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is an annual event. We will have a similar event next year, and I hope to see you again next year. Thank you and good evening.